Over the course of NFL history, the quarterback position has gone through many changes. From players that barely even attempted the forward pass and also played on the defensive side of the ball, to guys that can now throw 60-yard no-look bombs in the modern NFL today. So please, allow me to break down to you the complete timeline of the evolution of the most difficult position in sports, the quarterback. So, we start at the beginning of the quarterback's inception, in the dawn of the days of professional football where the quarterback was an afterthought. The forward pass was considered a gimmick, and running the football reigned supreme. And from the 1900s all the way up until the 1940s, there was a complete lack of great quarterbacks in the league. But finally, some transcendent quarterbacking talents emerged and truly kickstarted the evolution of the quarterback that we know today. One of the first of these unique quarterbacks was Washington's Sammy Baugh. He was one of the first quarterbacks to be able to completely take over a game with his ability to throw the football and use overwhelming arm talent to his advantage. But all quarterbacks from this era weren't your typical modern quarterback yet. No, not even close. Because for the first couple years of Sammy Baugh's career, he wasn't even listed as a quarterback. Baugh was solemnly labeled as a tailback for Washington, who just so happened to also be able to throw the ball. He also was one of the most versatile players in the league and in NFL history, as Sammy Baugh also played on the defensive side of the ball. But not only did he play on the defensive side of the ball, he also dominated, making multiple Pro Bowls purely for defensive reasons, with his crowning achievement coming in 1943 when he led the league in interceptions with 11, putting him at 14th all-time for single-season interceptions. So yeah, Sammy Baugh was absolutely incredible, and other notable quarterbacks from this era can include guys like Bob Waterfield of the Cleveland Rams and Sid Luckman, the only good quarterback in Chicago Bears history. All of these guys combined would be awarded with 6 championships in the 1940s and would do their part in evolving the quarterback and revealing the untapped potential of the position going forward. So, over the next 20 years or so, the NFL stayed rather stagnant at the quarterback position. Players such as Bobby Lane, Norm Van Brocklin, and Otto Graham continued to bring more popularity to the position, dominating the league in the process. But for how great these guys were, the next big evolution didn't come until Johnny Unitas was put into the spotlight later in the 1960s. Because with Unitas came the building blocks of what would later become the model elite pocket passing quarterback. Unitas wasn't like most quarterbacks before or after him, as he never had insane athleticism and didn't have a big arm or pinpoint accuracy. But Unitas was the first quarterback to set the gold standard for mastering the fundamentals of what it means to play the quarterback position. Unitas was the first elite pocket passer and was able to form connections with his receivers such as Raymond Berry, which would also be a revolutionary concept for this time period. Johnny Unitas was also able to control the field at an unparalleled level, with the only comparison throughout history coming from more modern players like Tom Brady and Peyton Manning. And with these new revolutionary concepts brought into the quarterback position by Unitas, success came with it shortly after. As Unitas finished his career with 10 Pro Bowl selections, he was a 5-time All-Pro, and on top of that, won 3 NFL championships and a Super Bowl. So with that dominance being said, once Johnny Unitas fizzled out of the league in the early 1970s, his impact on the NFL and the quarterback position as a whole was felt more than any quarterback in history. And the next 20 or so years worth of quarterbacks would all be compared to Unitas, which meant that Unitas set the expectation that every single quarterback had to be a great pocket passer. No more, no less. So now, going into the 1970s, there were 2 quarterbacks who both entered the league around the exact same time, and their rivalry would define the NFL for the next decade or so ahead. The 2 quarterbacks who refined the pocket passer role are Dallas Cowboys' Roger Staubach and the Pittsburgh Steelers' Terry Bradshaw. These 2 quarterbacks were the 2 main catalysts of the 2 dynasties of the 1970s, and because of that, as well as relatively similar playstyles, Staubach was a little more mobile than Bradshaw, but overall, these 2 quarterbacks' careers were destined to be intertwined with one another. First, let's start with Terry Bradshaw, who, just by looking at his stats, you would think that he was nothing special as a quarterback talent. For a Hall of Famer, a 3-time Pro Bowler and a 1-time All-Pro seems a bit underwhelming. But even with these mediocre accolades and the fact that Terry Bradshaw didn't really progress the quarterback position much in an evolutionary way, Bradshaw made up for this by pushing the boundaries on what a pocket passer quarterback could accomplish, especially when it mattered most. Because during his career, he was able to win an MVP in 1978 and won 4 4 Super Bowls and 2 Super Bowl MVPs, going an undefeated 4-0 in those Super Bowls. Bradshaw was the first quarterback who was able to just completely take over in crunch time, a quality that would turn out to be crucial to be considered a legendary quarterback in the future. And arguably the most important aspect of Bradshaw's career was his role in the Steelers' 1970s dynasty and how teams realized you truly need a great quarterback in order to win Super Bowl rings consistently. But with that being said about Terry Bradshaw, we move on to his counterpart, Roger Staubach. So, Roger Staubach had an extremely unique career, but similar to Bradshaw, he didn't contribute too much to the quarterback's evolution in the grand scheme of things. Staubach only played in the league for a short 11 years because at the age of 23, he was in the military and was busy fighting in the Vietnam War. But anyway, by the time Staubach joined the Cowboys, he proved that he was arguably the best player in the entire NFL after winning a Super Bowl and making the Pro Bowl in just his 3rd season. And for Staubach, most of the same applies to him as it did for Bradshaw, as Staubach also spearheaded a dynasty for the Cowboys, leading them to 2 Super Bowls in the 70s and kept the Cowboys as contenders for his entire time in the league. But as great as Staubach and Bradshaw were as players, as I stated before, they truly didn't fundamentally change anything about the quarterback position at its core. But that's not to say that other quarterbacks during this time did not. So during the 1970s era of football, we start to see the first quarterbacks break the pocket passing mold and invent a new style of playing quarterback, creating the scrambler archetype that didn't really take off as a viable way to play quarterback for a long time. And the quarterback who deserves a majority of the credit for creating the mobile archetype of the position that leaves the pocket often is the Minnesota Vikings' Fran Tarkenton. To me, Tarkenton is one of the most important and underrated players to ever play in the NFL, and because his unorthodox style of play never led to any Super Bowl wins, his play style was dismissed as a gimmick, and something that can never be replicated, and if it ever could be, it shouldn't be, because you can never win unless you have a traditional pocket passing quarterback. So yeah, that was pretty much the narrative at the time, but if we look a little deeper into Fran Tarkenton and his career, we can see that there is a lot more to his career in retrospect than you would think. Tarkenton was the first player who played quarterback to be able to weaponize his legs and also had an ability to torch defenses with his arm. Fran Tarkenton finished his career with 3,674 yards rushing, along with 32 touchdowns on the ground alone, which was completely unprecedented for his time. And the thing people don't realize about Fran Tarkenton's career is that at the time of his retirement, he held career passing records for categories like completions, attempts, yards, and touchdowns, all while being a so-called dual threat quarterback. And the fatal flaw the NFL wasn't able to realize at the time was that Tarkenton's scrambling style of play would be the future of the league, and his lack of Super Bowl rings weren't a ramification of his play style, but rather outside factors regarding his Vikings teams that left them 1 game short. Twice. 3 times. Okay, fine. 4 times, but that's it. There was also other great quarterbacks like Ken Stabler and Ken Anderson who progressed the quarterback position forward in the 70s. But I would argue that no quarterback since the position's inception was more important to the evolution of the position than Fran Tarkenton in the 1970s. So with that being said, we head into the 1980s, where the traditional pocket passing of Johnny Unitas and Terry Bradshaw seemed to be refined into a more recognizable gunslinger mold of quarterback. The 80s were defined by 4 quarterbacks: Dan Fouts, John Elway, Dan Marino, and Joe Montana. This decade of quarterback play, I would say, evolved the position very slightly, but the changes were still extremely necessary. Guys like Dan Marino and John Elway were able to use their insane arm talent to push the traditional pocket passer archetype to its absolute limit. John Elway was able to master the pocket passer role and show that, like Terry Bradshaw, this mold of quarterback has to be able to take over in the clutch, and with a well-rounded team can be a perennial Super Bowl contender. And for how great Joe Montana and Dan Fouts were, they truly didn't reinvent the quarterbacking position. Rather, they mastered being the ultimate field general, which is okay. And for Montana's case, this style of play led to him being considered the greatest quarterback to ever play football until he came along. But each era of football has a quarterback that truly pushes the boundaries of evolution further than any other of their time. Sammy Baugh, Norm Van Brocklin, Johnny Unitas, Fran Tarkenton, all guys who added a new ingredient to the perfect quarterback recipe. And for the 1980s, that special talent was Dan Marino. So above all else, what Dan Marino added to the quarterback position was his raw talent and arm strength, which set the bar going forward insanely high for quarterback talent. Before his entrance into the league, people had never seen anyone with as much skill as him, and began to prove that, literally in his second year in the league, he had the actual best individual season of all time and led the Dolphins straight to the Super Bowl. Marino had a commanding gunslinging style of play that led to him dominating in the regular season like no other quarterback before him. Defenses had to completely invent brand new schemes just to try and stop him from absolutely obliterating their defenses, and it didn't work. To say the least, Dan Marino was an anomaly of a player, but there was one issue. Like his evolutionary predecessor Fran Tarkenton, throughout the entirety of his illustrious career, Dan Marino never won a Super Bowl, ever. So although his playstyle was clearly tearing apart everything in his path, the public and front offices weren't completely convinced that you could win a Super Bowl with an unorthodox quarterbacking playstyle like Dan Marino or Fran Tarkenton. And maybe they were right. But to find the answer to that question, we need to move on to the next decade, the 1990s. Now, with this era, a lot of the same quarterbacks from the 90s dominated, like John Elway and Dan Marino from before, but there were two quarterbacks who were absolutely crucial to the evolution of the quarterback and where we are with the position today. These two players whose playstyles are completely opposite from one another are Brett Favre and Randall Cunningham. So let's start with Favre, who took Dan Marino's gunslinging style of play and cranked it past the maximum limit and injected crack into it. So with Brett Favre's reckless style of play, it brought insane upsides with insane downsides. Favre would finish a game throwing 6 touchdowns with no picks, and then would turn right around the next week and throw 0 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. And for what it's worth, this style of play that Brett Favre truly embraced was actually able to win a Super Bowl in 1997, proving that you could win with an all-in gunslinger playstyle. But later on in his career, during his absolute prime, Favre would lose games in the worst ways possible by his own hands. And I think it's fair to say that Brett Favre threw more back-breaking interceptions than any other quarterback ever. So yeah, although his playstyle was clearly working at some level, he also left a bad taste in viewers' mouths because it seemed as if he was the reason his teams lost so many close, meaningful games. And with Favre's flashy style of play, he retired with damn near every single positive passing record and the negative ones as well. This also inspired a new generation of risk-taking gunslinging quarterbacks who we'll get into later, but for now, let's focus on the other quarterback I mentioned earlier, Randall Cunningham. He was an absolute pioneer and nothing less. Cunningham had the body to be a wide receiver and was insanely athletic, but chose to play quarterback instead. And luckily for him, like Dan Marino before him, he was blessed with an unprecedented level of arm strength. So not only could he run around the pocket and then take off for a long touchdown and defy gravity on plays like this one, he could also throw dots from a mile away and go over the top of defenses with ease. And if it weren't for him being on some terrible Eagles teams,
oh my goodness,
injuries, and an awful O-line throughout his entire career, he could have easily made the Hall of Fame. But what's most interesting is that after being known as a ridiculously athletic quarterback who was able to break down defenses with his jukes, unlike anyone in his position before him, he was able to completely reinvent himself as a player later on. As after his injuries had taken a toll on him, his arm talent still persisted, and he was able to perfectly translate his scrambling style of play into a traditional pocket passer. And not only that, but in 1998 he was able to make a Pro Bowl and first team All-Pro, leading the 1998 Vikings, arguably the greatest offense of all time. But Randall Cunningham was never able to win a Super Bowl. Once again, there may be an unfortunate common theme for these revolutionary quarterbacks of each era. Regardless, Cunningham's equally as flashy playstyle as Brett Favre's was also able to inspire a younger generation of athletic kids to want to play quarterback growing up, which produced some crazy talent. And with that being said, we move straight into the 2000s era of quarterbacks and what I believe is the golden age of the position. Ben Roethlisberger, Steve McNair, Kurt Warner, Phillip Rivers, McNabb, Palmer, Breeze, and the 3 most important quarterbacks of this era, that being Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, and Michael Vick. In the case of Manning and Brady, it's pretty simple. They took the traditional pocket passing quarterback, a type of QB that's proven to be able to win championships, and utterly mastered the position to a level that wasn't even thought of as possible. These two guys would get to the line of scrimmage, immediately break down exactly what the defense was running, audible into a counterplay, then audible the counter into another counter, and shred the defense physically and mentally that way. Tom Brady and Peyton Manning also not only dominated the regular season like no other quarterback, but they really did a pretty good job in the playoffs as well. But was this the peak of quarterbacking? Could the position evolve any more than it already was at? Well, allow me to introduce you to Michael Vick. People truly don't remember how electrifying early 2000s Michael Vick was. Besides Lamar Jackson, there has never been another quarterback who was a lethal threat at all times of a play. Vick had one of the best arms of all time, the best elusiveness and ability to juke as a quarterback ever, and best of all, was insanely fun to watch. If it weren't for Michael Vick, I can promise you we would not be where we are with the quarterback position today. And with that being said, now we transition into the 2010s, where Tom Brady continued to dominate, and Michael Vick, who now translated into a pocket passer with the Eagles, passed the baton to Lamar Jackson. Because in the 2010s era of football, we saw old styles of playing football completely mastered. Fran Tarkenton's scrambling mobile style of play was mastered by Russell Wilson, and even elevated to a championship-winning level. Tom Brady was able to take Johnny Unitas' pocket passing and field general role to another stratosphere and become the best player on the best dynasty ever that could not be stopped no matter what. But for the 2010s, no quarterback was able to progress the position more than Aaron Rodgers. Never, and I mean never before has there been a player with more raw talent, skill, and just an overall feel for the game of football like Aaron Rodgers. Rodgers controlled football games like no other, and at times it looked like he was literally doing whatever he wanted whenever he wanted. Rodgers was able to take the Dan Marino mold of a talented gunslinger and adapt it to best fit his strengths as a player, becoming arguably the most talented quarterback to ever play the game. But unfortunately, just like those before him, Rodgers has been disappointing to say the least when it comes to Super Bowl succession. Huh? I'm forgetting someone. Who could I possibly be forgetting? So in the 2010s, the game of football was blessed with a deity of a player that the game has never seen before or since. A quarterback who is simply a glitch in the Matrix. The man who I'm referring to is Patrick Mahomes, the most unique quarterback of all time. The 2010s gave us Mahomes in the later years of the decade, but his impact was still larger than anyone else not named Aaron Rodgers in that time period. Patrick Mahomes was the first quarterback to be able to take a special talent from various quarterbacks from history and absolutely master their best traits. Mahomes has the scrambling ability of a Tarkenton Russell Wilson type, the throwing power of a Marino or Vick, and the IQ of a Peyton Manning or Tom Brady, most of the time at least. But even though Mahomes has dominated the latter half of the 2010s and most likely the 2020s, other guys like Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, and Justin Herbert will most likely carry out the quarterback evolution timeline in the 2020s and will continue to warp the traditional molds of what a quarterback can become. But overall, from guys like Sammy Baugh to Patrick Mahomes, truly, the quarterback position has changed drastically and not at all at the exact same time. So if you enjoyed this video, then like and comment, and you can even subscribe if you want to watch more videos just like this one, and watch one of these videos right here on the screen. They're really good, trust me. Anyways, until next time.